Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast. This time with your host, just your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, and wrestling's premier photographer, Dr. Mike Lano. So yeah, we had a guest, but the guest canceled at the last minute, so it's just going to be us.
But first, I want to say congratulations to our 49ers. Even though I moved, they're still my team. I went to every victory party and the parade, and I remember the first one with Dianne Feinstein and Coach Bill Walsh going down Market Street to City Hall. You know, that's the route for pretty much everybody. The Giants victory parades. I don't know
Warriors.
If that was the route. Did the Warriors do that one? Because
Yeah,
I was
same.
only once in the East Bay, which were fantastic. They were a lot of fun, but nothing beats going from the Financial down Market to City Hall, and then the whole reveille and everything at City Hall. That's the best, no matter the
Well, they don't
team.
do the City Hall thing anymore, though. They just, for the Warriors last year, they just had them go to a spot, and then they didn't even have a press conference. They had a press conference, but the fans weren't allowed to come. So it was literally, just the procession of the parade, and that was the end of it. Once the parade.
I went to all of their ones in the East Bay.
Yes, I went to those too.
The Oakland one, the very last one, was great because the guy who left, who was kind of what's that guy, Kevin Durant?
Yes.
Had him to pose with everybody, and you had all kinds of access. Maybe they're being more cautious now. And I'm surprised. I just want to bring up something before we get into our wrestling into things as to why this has not happened in wrestling. But it's tapered off a bit. But, for a lot of the spring and summer, fans were throwing stuff and hitting musical artists in the face with crap. And, we're talking major players, major artists. And I'm surprised it hasn't happened. I mean, it has happened in wrestling, but not lately. Back in our day, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, I mean, I saw people throwing bottles and rocks. That happened a lot in Puerto Rico when I shot there, and George Napolitano can speak better to that. The fans there truly...
Happened to me in Pacifica.
Yeah,
They throw bottles, but they threw ice. Cups that were filled with ice at us.
Wait, one of Roland's first shows, Roland Alexander, APW, I think it was their very first or second show. It was like in Modesto. It was it Chris Cole? Chris Cole, we're driving home. The show is over. I photographed it. I was Roland's photographer pretty much from day one. And somebody threw a rock, broke the glass, and hurt him. If that was Chris, had to go to the hospital. And, it was over. Once the show was over, somebody just did that. I don't know if you heard about that, Russ, but that was...
No, that was before I joined. So.
You don't have to do that. And I'm surprised it's not happening in the theater, thankfully. It seems we haven't heard any incidents in about 6 weeks or so. But what an insane...
Well, it depends what theater you're going to. People have gotten into fights over at the Barbie movie, that people, first of all, start trying to interrupt the movie because they don't agree with it. So they start yelling at the screen. And then people start getting into fist fights with the people that are trying to interrupt the movie. And, chaos ensues. It's happened at a number of different theaters because I think one thing is that for the 2 years that people didn't go anywhere during the pandemic, I think a lot of people forgot how to behave in public. I mean, it's not a small number.
If they ever knew how to. Maybe
right. They ever knew how to, and then they go to the public.
Stars, they're not the Lady Gaga or whoever. BB Rexa was actually a legit name artist of today who got hit. Her eye was like cut and it was a mess. She had to have stitches. Beautiful girl, talented artist. And it's like, come on, you're not the show. You're as an audience member.
In fact, that brings up a wrestling related topic, which our friend Shane Dynasty, Doc Atrocity, was performing in Reno last night, and he said that one of the members from the band that was supposed to play during intermission got in the ring during his match, and he didn't have any shoes on, and he was completely drunk. And you can imagine how kind and generous Shane was to someone that behaved at such a way. And they escorted him out, which is code word for probably kicked his ass. Threw him outside the ring, and then they canceled the band. And they said that they wouldn't let the band get their stuff until the show was over and they had packed up the ring.
Let me say this about Shane. Let's give him his flowers, because there was a guy, and depending on how, I don't know exactly when you started going to Gym Wars, but I was lucky enough to see him blossom from day one. Similar to Vinny Massaro was just a referee. They had him as a ref about.
Yeah, no, I never went to Gym Wars before I became a manager. I never been to an APW show. A lot of
different character changes and lots of stuff.
Yeah.
When the lesbian angle.
But he's the one that taught me how to become a manager. Shane was the
excellent at a heat magnet. He certainly.
Oh yes, oh yeah, and psychology. And for anyone that isn't aware of it, go back and watch our interview with Shane, which, in my opinion, is one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done. Was the one that we did December of last year with Shane, and he's just the guy has forgotten more about wrestling than most marks will ever know.
When he's in Reno, is he working with Thornstowe and that whole?
Yeah, the monster. Yeah, the Monster Factory.
Yeah, they're amazing talent. Those guys were on Impact for a couple of years, the two of them, and they was really hoping for more to come of it. I know they've done at least one, if not two, Japan tours. They're extremely talented, all those guys, and we were blessed to have seen them grow up in AP-Dub. And
there's like a dozen guys that I think should have gotten a chance at the WWE and never got one, and Adam Thornstowe is definitely one of those people.
You can wrestle anybody, but I mean, I remember I've told you this story where Icebox Robert Smith, who was with not the true Bay Bombers, but it was the later incarnation, one of many incarnations, and I don't want to slight it because he did well. He was a big star, and he nagged me. He loved pro wrestling, so he nagged me to bring him to APW. Long story short, he asked Roland, he wanted to get involved, and he was taking Ricky Thompson's school, but he only went to a few because he didn't like taking bumps. Somehow or other, he got a job as the manager for the West Side Players, the second incarnation, and good guy. But anyway, he wanted to do a show, and so he got Tony Hernandez, Tony Fury, and I as co-promoters, the three of us, for that first show. And he was going to use all of, you've heard this, the Mike Mott, Donovan Morgan, Frank Murdoch, Iron guys. And then like 3-4 days before the show, he didn't want to their monetary terms that he'd signed for. This is Icebox, who was the money mark for it. And I think that was the scenario. And so we had to scramble. And I made the call, and MPT, Mr. Primetime, and Thornstowe came down and had a terrific match for us, as did Steve Rosano and Vic Grimes. They had a death match. But that was when Adam Thornstowe, who we'd already seen him X number of times in APW, et cetera, incredible talent. He didn't have a tattoo on him then.
I know. You have to go back a ways.
Not one. He looked like a clean-cut All-American guy.
It's just like when The Undertaker. You have to go back a ways, but there was a time when The Undertaker didn't have any tattoos either.
Oh, that's true. But Thornstowe, an amazing talent. I could have seen him having matches as Impact TNA X Division champion. And
in my personal opinion, he's got every bit of wrestling skill that Bryan Danielson has. He just does.
Let me say this about Icebox Robert Smith. He ended up, because he had Kirk White in his ear, the late Kirk White, the first couple of shows. And, I got cheated on money for signs, which I eventually got from him. And he's a really sweet guy, Icebox. At the end, the last couple of years, he's promoting shows every couple of months in Alameda. I forgot what it's called, the Stars of Wrestling promotion. But he had the most diverse locker room. There was like Carlito and some Hispanic guys, a lot of African-American talent. The one guy that passed away drowned.
Virgil. Not Virgil.
The one that drowned saving his son. He saved his son.
No. Yeah, the other guy. I'm trying to remember.
He was a part of those guys, Crime Time.
Yeah.
An amazing guy. And he brought in lots of...
Cyrus.
Yeah.
Cyrus.
But he bring in two Boogeyman, but he did have some other talent. He constantly gave Jardy Franz work, who was another great junior heavyweight X division guy from APW and other promotions. And when Jardy wasn't able to work for anyone else, he would give him work. So I do want to give him props. He did have a lot of fun shows, and it was a blast to be in the back when guys like, gosh, the guy that's managing the heel, Bobby Lashley, he brought him in a ton of times when he was Impact champion. And Shotzi Blackheart had a lot of death matches on his shows. And so we're so proud of her. Now she's doing a sort of a devilish gimmick as, I guess, a heelish babyface. She cut all of her green hair off after all of these years with the green hair she was famous for, if you've seen her. Great talent there. All right. Unless you want to add anything, I want to hear what the latest. We don't call him Jungle Boy anymore, but what is the latest? Because I've been busy on my end of the book that Evan and I are doing on John and Tolis, and partly on Chris Tolis, the Tolis brothers, but mainly John Tolis. So I haven't followed that thing. CM Punk gets canned for it, but is this another incident with?
Yeah, there is another incident that's going on, which was that he was apparently coming back from that show, and he was at the airport.
At the UK, the London.
Yes, yes, and he was in the New York airport on the way back, going through customs, I think. And he is apparently, allegedly, all this stuff, until there's a court case, is alleged. But it was alleged that he was super drunk, which doesn't surprise me, and that he got in an altercation with one of the New York police officers at the airport. And he is claiming that during the arrest, that the police officer sexually assaulted him. During the arrest.
I just heard somebody else claim that, another wrestler claimed that he was sexually harassed by TSA, though, in this case.
No, I think that's I'm sorry, no, that's not Jungle Boy, that's Riddle. That's
Matt Riddle.
Yes.
Is that who you're thinking of, Matt Riddle?
Yeah, I was.
They kind of,
yeah, that's right. I got those two stories crossed. It's Riddle.
Jack Perry is still on suspension.
Yeah, he is.
And let me add this, though, on him, because I don't know how many you were at. I was Dominic's photographer for Fog City Wrestling. And Luke Perry, famous actor who passed away, sadly, with a heart issue, brought his young son all the way up from L.A. I don't know why they were coming up. They came up in particular so Jack Perry could see Awesome Kong and that guy Hernandez when they were in TNA, and Savio Vega. Dominic with Fog City, it was a fun little promotion. It basically primarily used all of Roland's APW wrestlers.
Yeah, we had him on the show too.
And but I took pictures of, later would become Jungle Boy. Jack Perry is just a little kid with his dad and digging the show. So I guess Luke loved pro wrestling, and he got his son to also love it. And sad that thing happened with CM Punk, but maybe
I think a lot of it was CM Punk's doing. They argued over whether to use real glass or not for a stunt they're going to do with a slam on a car windshield. And I don't know why Perry wanted real glass on there. I think we all learned a lesson.
Maybe he already had a daddy soda prior to talking.
Yeah, because I don't know if you remember, but Goldberg, when he went and smashed that window with his hand and cut all his tendons in his hand with the Bret Hart angle, or not? I think it was with Bret Hart. Was in the limo, and he was supposed to smash a different window, and he missed, and he hit the actual real window, broke the window with his hand, and cut all his tendons. And just maybe one of the stupidest injuries in the history of professional wrestling, because if he'd used a rock, if he'd used a baseball bat, if he'd used a tire iron or a crowbar, then he wouldn't have hurt his hand. I don't know how dumb you have to be to try to smash a window with your hand.
Maybe not dumb. Also, along that vein, I just was emailing back and forth with Mick Foley about it, because I had the pictures of when Sabu thought he had a gimmicked sugar bottle that you would
Oh
crack
yes.
Cactus Jack's head, but instead it was a legit bottle. And I shot that show, and it was at ECW Arena because Heyman was at ringside, and Mick got hurt legit. It was like getting potatoed with a bottle, getting hurt legit with a real bottle. It didn't break initially, and Mick, I'm sure, had a concussion from that. I mean, I used to tell Sabu and Cactus in the 90s, from about 92, 93 on, that they were going to end up wheelchaired if they didn't go a little slower and take more precautions and stuff. I don't know how many times I told them in the dressing room, but I'm pleasantly surprised. Mick, I mean, both guys are in pain. Sabu had the hip replacement.
He can only walk because he has a hip replacement. So
he came to, I think you were there maybe at the Gym Wars because you had already managed. Maybe you didn't come back for that one, but Sabu came, and this was when he was starting to live with and got engaged to Melissa Coates. And so she was trying to help him, throw him the chair stuff. He could not barely move. This was when he started a GoFundMe to get money for the hip replacement. He could barely move. He did his best. He was like gutting through the pain.
Well, I remember he was booked in that disastrous Russell Fan Fest in 2007. And back then he could barely move. He was part of that.
Well, but after he had the surgery, it was like he was back to his normal self. He was pain-free because he had a tag match with Van Damme against the Hardys that I shot. And he was moving around like, the old days. So,
but when you have a hip replacement, probably the last thing you should do is be getting into the ring. Once you've had your...
The bottom line about all of these injuries and all of this stuff is that the boys, the wrestlers, no matter what promotion, they need lifetime health insurance.
Absolutely. And now that the WWE has merged with the UWF, this is kind of a transition.
UFC.
UFC, sorry.
The parent company. They've not merged those two entities. They're owned by the same parent.
Right. And now I mean, Vince got $5 billion, I think, in his pocket from that transaction.
I think it was a little higher, but it wasn't as much as Dana White and the Fertittis got for UFC. They got like 13, and I think Vince got either 8.9 or somewhere in that ballpark.
Either way, anywhere from 5 to 8.
Then they'll know
how he can cry poverty and say that he can't afford health insurance for the guys that work for him.
It was just the other day. That was the first time since the 50s. I think it was Wednesday that a McMahon did not own a majority stake in the company. Now that other company they sold to does. So they're going to be the ones that are going to take shit for not paying for, Ross or Kios for these guys so they have a retirement and proper health care to last them well beyond when they leave the company. And, that the reason, or that being just a day or two later, that's why The Rock was on SmackDown. They were putting the big guns, The Rock and Cena, on that SmackDown show last Friday, subtly without the fans knowing. It's because the transition occurred. They want a big bang. And
to be honest with you, I think The Rock is a lot less busy than he used to be.
He's taking a self-imposed, I think he said he wanted to, the last movie, Black Adam, didn't do as well.
Exactly. This is not self-imposed.
I enjoyed that movie, but,
I did not. I thought it was a piece of crap. It was so cliched. Can you tell me one thing that happened in that movie that you haven't seen in every other superhero movie?
I have. Hey, I'll tell you a movie. I don't know, Russ, if you're a horror fan as much as you are a DC or Marvel.
Yes, I am.
Well, I rewatched on Svengoolie, and I hadn't seen it since I was a little kid. Since I was like 4, it scared the crap out of me.
I do love Svengoolie, too.
Mr. Sardonicus last night. And I had not seen that movie, a William Castle movie, and he was like the wrestling's Jack Pfeffer, but as a movie gimmick guy and a real carny and a character in a good sense. His movies were all a lot of fun. He did a lot of stupid gimmicks like the Tingler, where they had like
the seats with
seats. They had the fans, the marks were getting shocked. This thing, the guy's face, that has to be the scariest, gruesome for that time period, whatever year that was made, 1961. Scary stuff, and it still held up for me, and I hadn't seen it since I was like 4 years old when it really scared me.
Sardonicus?
Mr. Sardonicus, yeah, he becomes a ghoul, this good-looking guy, and he starts digging up, I won't divulge all of it, digging up a grave and eating a corpse, as a ghoul does. And he got this curse of a permanent, horrific-looking smile with his teeth sticking out of his face. It's really scary makeup for the time. And the actor who did it, who was a very famous guy in a lot of horror movies and some James Bond movies and other stuff, he could only wear the makeup for like an hour. They'd spend 5-6 hours putting it on him, and he could only wear it. It was so punishing, I guess, grueling, touching his face, legit, that he could only wear it for an hour. So they didn't have a lot of shoots with the full makeup on, and it's pretty creepy. I give that 5 stars. So I'm urging people go take a.
Well, Halloween's coming up, so maybe that.
So that brings me to the Black Adam. I mean, I watched it because I kind of have to force myself to watch whatever he's doing. But here's the problem, and since COVID, and this is what cost him his TV show, not as much press. They jerked around the time slots, so the Young Rock show got canceled when it should have run at least 1 or 2 more seasons. So that was a shame. So he took that as like the public had seen him in too many movies in a short period of time, and then the TV show and everything else he was doing being very visible. And now he's even back, again for the second go round, saying he's not sure if he's going to run for president in 4 years after this next election, Biden-Trump, which will be a horror movie in and of itself.
Yeah, it's already turning out that way.
I think you're right. You're absolutely right. So he's taken a verbal, self-imposed time off, exile. So he has some time. Maybe they'll finally go through for Mania, although it should be Cody getting the title, but Rock, Roman. But the main purpose of having him and Cena on that show was to have that new company, Endeavor, flex their muscles that owns WWE and UFC now. And there's the talk of maybe combined show, but the problem is most of the UFC audience does not like WWE, but X percentage of WWE's audience do watch UFC. So,
although the UFC folks have watched guys like Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley.
That's when they like it, and particularly Ronda. Lashley was never in UFC; he was in Bellator.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And Strikeforce, and I actually saw one of his fights. He was pretty good.
Brock Lesnar was champion for a long time there.
Who was?
Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, he was champion. And
there's Ken Shamrock if you go back further, and Dan Severn, and the WWE is no complete stranger to.
Well, now they're going to get someone who has some legit fighting experience. But from AEW, the word is that Jade Cargill is now going to be going there.
Yeah,
I got something from Thunder Rosa, who had a lot of history in Northern California, particularly on Marcus Mack shows. She was on
Wrestling for Charity. I've worked shows with her too.
Yeah, Melissa Cervantes, really nice person. But she said that she and Jade Cargill were on a show in Daly City, and I asked Kevin Gill, and he thinks it was a Rikishi show. One of those very few Daly City or Pacifica shows, because I never recall hearing Jade Cargill, in the Bay Area whatsoever. So, Kevin, who for most recently, he was doing announcing with what's that APW guy, AJ Kirsch.
Oh, Kirsch, yes.
For Hood Slam for years. The shows of Hood Slam I went to, they were always there. And of course, Kevin Gill has done a lot for APW, but more recently he's been like the lead announcer for GCW, the so-called Gore promotion, although they have normal matches and normal wrestlers, not just all the hardcore, total hardcore stuff. But so Jade Cargill was supposed to be going to WWE. She dropped cleanly to Chris Statlander last, was it Friday night? Or no, it was the main event last night of Collision. It's hard to keep track. They have too much TV. I think they should get rid of their Friday Rampage show.
I agree.
And have the 2-hour Dynamite, which is great, and then the Collision that's 2 hours on Saturday, which has a completely different look and feel.
Maybe boil that down to an hour. Tighten that up to just.
Well, you won't be able to. Now, if you people that don't watch AEW all the time, they should watch the Arthur Ashe show next Wednesday because every match is kind of a main event type thing. And it's going to be a huge, huge show. MJF against Samoa Joe, which should be off the charts. That should be great.
But I personally miss the 1 hour wrestling show.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think more is less.
Yeah.
And when you know, because I, for good or bad, force myself to watch all that stuff in real time. And every night, I'm going to say it, Mondays, 3 hours of Raw. Way too much. An hour and a half would be plenty for that. Tuesday nights, if there's not Dark Side of the Ring or some of the Scandal shows or MLW.
Tales from the Territory, yeah.
2 hours of NXT. Wednesday, of course, 2 hours Dynamite. Thursday, 2 hours Impact plus an hour of New Japan, which is can't miss. Friday, 2 hours of SmackDown, 1 hour AEW. Saturday, 2 hours of AEW. And then
Sundays are pay-per-view days.
Yeah, Sundays are pay-per-view, unless, mostly AEW and Impact, although WWE, they're really pretty much all Saturday pay-per-views now. It's too much effing wrestling, too much to watch.
We have talked about that. We did do a show all dedicated to just too much wrestling, and I agree. I think that they
Shire. Now, originally, like Los Angeles, he had a 90-minute show, but then it just was an hour when he moved up to Sacramento, memory serves, and you could get everything in there, and you could pack the Cow Palace based on that every Saturday show or Friday night show. It was on 2 different slots. But you could pack the Cow Palace and the other venues with just an hour of TV. It's just you.
Well, like a couple weeks ago or about a month ago, AEW did that deal where they had, basically 2 pay-per-views on back to back.
That was insane. They were both pay-per-views. I got to give them credit. I thought absolutely no point in doing one a week later, and I still think that way. But it did deliver as a show, even though it didn't have the star power of London in front of whatever the dispute.
Right, but it was just so much overkill that I can't tell you the results of any of those matches from that double pay-per-view because
I can from the London one, but FTR beating Young Bucks, but that was a pretty historic show no matter what the attendance was. And now people are,
it gets to be so much though that it's a blur that you kind of any other matches that
AEW, they have probably one of the greatest rosters in history because they have access to
all the rejects that the WWE does.
Rejects, but I'm talking New Japan. They have times Impact wrestlers come in. Obviously, AAA, the top promotion in Mexico now. Several women's groups supply, wrestling. They have the luxury of Tony's money,
but they don't have the direction, and that's why things are going so crazy there.
Strong talent person, head of talent relations, maybe not a current peer like Chris Daniels has that role now. Bully Ray was saying, and I agree with him, that somebody like Jim Ross, who did an excellent job, who can yell and scream at him and the boys are afraid of, but also respect, that would be the perfect guy to prevent problems with like the CM Punk, Jack Perry situation, but also tighten up booking and let things breathe. That's what AEW does not do. For all the excellent matches and the thrills and the fun, and it is fun, but a lot of the stuff can't breathe because when you're done with one exciting thing, you don't re-show it and come back and review it and really let it sink in. No, you're on to the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. There's a lot of stuff going on. You have enough angles for 4 or 5 shows. And I've drawn this comparison, and Meltzer agrees with me on this. In the old days, like Dallas TV show was like the AWA. You had like one big angle, one major angle, maybe once a year. Or a year, 2 in a year and a half's time. And wrestling during the Vince Russo crash and burn thing started having tons of it. Now, AEW has taken that even further, and there's so much stuff like on a 2-hour Dynamite, you can't absorb all of it. And if they would just have like maybe a third of all of that cool stuff, then you might retain it and it would mean more.
And they can space it out. They have enough programs that they can space it out. They don't have to jam it all into one show. But
So
it's just
the need, because it is difficult. If you have a TV show on Friday, what's the point on Saturday? I think I would shed the Rampage on Friday, which they just tape after Dynamite on Wednesday nights, typically. Not always, but most of the time. And do just have the Dynamite Wednesday, and then you let a couple of days go by and let everything just breathe.
It's like the wrestling in the ring itself, where everything is a finishing move. You don't have anyone chain wrestle anymore. Up and build up to
the finishing moves are transitions. I used to bitch about that with the figure four and the lariat and the suplex not being finishes anymore. Now it's even worse. Now the Canadian Destroyer is just a transition. They can
guys hop right up after.
Nobody sells, right? Nobody. The artist selling and what you're talking about, Mad and Chain Wrestling, they're lost arts like Carney.
But what I'm saying is, it's sort of like, because the matches themselves can't have to always one-up themselves so much, the storylines kind of follow that same sort of thing, which is like, every week you've got to be the biggest. This has to be the biggest and greatest storyline that we've ever had. Just like every match.
W really hasn't had storylines. They are more so now, and I really love the Tony Storm stuff, which I'm writing a piece on that now. It's basically the character from Sunset Boulevard, this aging silent film star who still thinks she's in the movies. And Tony Storm is doing that, but she's adding her own tweak to it and really funny.
Yeah, it's cute.
You know where that line came from? And I'm going to say this on this show. That line, chin up, tits out, came from Ann Calvello, who used to co-host my TV show, the fabulous Moolah of roller derby. She skated as a heel, a red shirt skater. 7 decades in the Bay Area primarily, and total legend. And her expression was tickets out. So she used to tell all the females, stick your tits out, your tickets out. That was her expression back to the 30s and 40s. And that's where Tony Storm's line she's doing now, but she's added a little to it. Watch out for the shoe, mind the shoe, when she throws the shoe at Renee Paquette.
Right.
That's cute. Storylines like the Bloodline is probably the greatest storyline in the last 10 years.
Is it great? Is it that great? I mean, don't you think people are?
It's getting a few holes.
Yeah. Don't you think people are? And don't you think people are getting tired of Cody Rhodes being this constant bridesmaid but never a champion?
As an old school babyface, that's the point. So he loses a lot. He lost a ton. He was getting destroyed by Brock. Russ, I've only got about 5 minutes left in me. Not COVID. I've had a million COVID tests, but then if we only got 5 minutes, then we got to give commemorate. We have to mention the passing of Brett Sawyer. Ooh, I went to his school. This was in 94, 93 and 94. I was there for other stuff. But Bruce, I think his real name was Wayne Bruce. Anyway, and he was.
You can do sign language for the fans. You can.
Let me get a little water.
Okay.
Talk while I'm away.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. So I mean, Brett Sawyer passed during the week, and we also had the sad death of General Adnan, who was part of the he was Sheik Adnan al-Kaisi as well, and part of that triumvirate between Sergeant Slaughter, the Iron Sheik, and General Adnan, when the Sheik was Colonel Mustafa and Adnan was General Adnan, and they would go to the ring in that 1991-92 Gulf War, post-Gulf War, fervor, and really rile up the fans. My lasting memory of Adnan was I saw him in an
I photographed him. He worked as Chief Billy White Wolf.
Before he got his neck broken by Ken Patera.
Yeah, even before he went to AWA as Sheik Adnan, how a guy from Iraq could portray a Native American.
Or the other way around.
And people bought it. They bought it in Hawaii first because I think he did it as early as 76, 75, 76 for Ed Francis in Honolulu at the HIC Arena. Then takes it and is paired with Chief Jay Strongbow as tag champions before they brought in Frank Hill as Jules Strongbow, which is hilarious because Jules Strongbow, the real Jules Strongbow, was legit Native American and was our booker, our best booker ever at Los Angeles, 60s through 1974. And probably, I think he booked even before that because he promoted and booked in the late 50s. But so Chief Frank Hill, who was a jobber in Kansas City and Los Angeles, and then is brought in as Chief Jay Strongbow's fictitious brother, Jules Strongbow. That came after Sheik Adnan as Chief Billy White Wolf, which
right.
was...
And the bloodiest match that I ever saw live was an AWA cage match back in 1984, or maybe it was 83, over at the Cow Palace, where Jerry Crusher Blackwell was in the cage with Sheik Adnan. And Adnan had one of those forearm wraps, and he had snuck in a foreign object. And he took that foreign object out, and there were no refs, so he just went ahead. And, you know, Jerry Blackwell was one of the great bleeders of all time. And Adnan went nuts on his forehead, and then Blackwell took the foreign object away from Adnan and started whapping him in the forehead, and there was blood absolutely everywhere. I'm glad I didn't have ringside seats for that because I probably have hepatitis. So
here's what I want you to do. If you can get out your programs, or maybe just look online and go over the results of some of the AWA shows that you saw in the Bay Area, because I went because I was Roy Shire's ringside photographer once I moved from LA to SF the last couple of years. But even before that, there was no Cow Palace photographer. I'd fly up for most all of Roy's bigger shows. And, you know, it's like from 74 on, before I moved up there permanently, January 79. But then when Roy Shire quits, retires, like January of 81, after his very last battle royal, I go with his publicist, Davey Rosenberg, who said, we're going to go and work for Vern Gagne. So I shot the first couple of years of those shows. The first one was a battle royal. It was like 6 weeks after Roy Shire's great battle royal, perhaps one of the greatest ones in terms of talent I'd ever seen.
You mention it on every show.
I mention it. But the Gagne, so if you can look up the results of the shows you went to, because on that first Vern Gagne show at the Oakland Arena, Gagne defended his AWA strap against the then heel Jerry Blackwell. That was the co-main event to the Battle Royal. And if you remember, 49er legend Leo Namalini, who had quite the career in pro wrestling.
The Lion.
Yeah, Leo the Lion was the fictitious promoter for Vern in San Francisco.
Right.
He was the goodwill guy.
I do remember that.
But he had at the time, I think like 51, 52.
That's when Russ Francis's dad was wrestling in the AWA and did some AWA shows here. Russ Francis's dad was.
Well, Russ Francis's dad was the promoter in Honolulu, who was a wrestler, but he was a wrestler in the 50s and early 60s. Ed Francis was Russ Francis's dad.
Right, and he wrestled on some AWA shows.
Not in the Bay Area. He was too old by that point. He'd already retired as a promoter. You might be thinking of somebody else. I know Russ's brothers who tried their hand in pro wrestling. But look up those cards, and maybe I would like to hear from you. And I could take a back seat and listen to you, because I may not have gone to all of those. I didn't go to all those shows as I should have with Brody on them, because I was busy at the time. I couldn't make every single show. I tried to make all the Brody ones and the ones with Hanson on them and Rick Martel. But
I know this, that I went to as many Road Warriors and as many matches as the Road Warriors were booked on.
Yeah, they wrestled a couple of times with the Fabs.
Yeah, and they also wrestled the Midnight Rockers, if you remember. Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty.
Were the third and last Super Clash, the one where Medusa took the title from Sherry, that was at the Cow Palace.
Yeah, I wasn't at that. I was already...
That was a big show. I mean, Gagne's cards were good.
I was in San Diego at the time.
You know, we didn't really... I can't even remember if the NWA hardly came. They did come into Bill Graham Civic because I shot those, but there weren't a lot of those. So our alternative to WWF's two show busy shows was Gagne's shows, which delivered. I think there were some great shows they put.
Yeah, I really liked the AWA shows when they were at San Francisco, but it did mean we got a lot less talent. We didn't get to see a lot of the great NWA wrestlers. Really,
they did come in because I shot a couple of them. I remember Nikita. It was a babyface challenging Flair, and then I thought there was another Bill Graham Civic right in San Francisco show where Road Warrior Hawk challenged Flair.
Yeah, but you didn't see like Dusty Rhodes didn't come to the Bay Area.
The first one though, the one with Flair against Nikita, the Road Warriors and Dusty. I forget who they took on. They were defending the 6-man championship. So Dusty, he wasn't on all of them. You're right, but he was on that first one, and then. I've said this a million times, and I said it right to Cody and Dustin's face. Our very last Roy Shire U.S. champion was their dad, Dusty. A convoluted thing because Roy Shire had lost his TV. He went from using Portland TV to Kansas City TV. And like the last 6-7 months of his promotion, because he had no TV studio, nothing to do, so he brought in Eddie Graham's television, which is insanely terrific, with localized interviews with like the Funks, Lord Alfred Hayes, Barry Windham, Mike Graham talking about coming into the Cow Palace. They did for 3 shows, and the third and last one was the Battle Royal, the very last Battle Royal. In it were both Funks, Harley Race, Kiniski, Dusty, of course, who Pat won the thing, but the last 4 guys in there. It was insane. Like the opening match had Ernie Ladd against Ron Starr. Ernie Ladd was always a main event guy, but he's in the opener, or he's in the match after the Battle Royal, which was Roy Shire's openers. That was the way Roy did it. No other promoter had the Battle Royal first.
And while you went out, we wanted to give a little bit of a thought to Brett Sawyer before your.
Well, yeah, I was coughing up as I've been throwing up. I don't know what I had probably too many vaccinations all at once. And have been sick since, even though they say, it really shouldn't have been causative. But whatever it was, maybe I got bad needle or something. But I got to see them and photograph them team, a couple of times, Bruce and Buzz. I was never sold on the fact that they were legit brothers. Bruce, who just passed, Wayne Sawyer, said he was a half brother. And, his school wasn't super duper impressive, but I got to see a lot of talent in the Florida area, which was packed with talent in the early 90s, like Penelope Paradise. And
didn't they have The Undertaker as one of their early students?
Not at that school, not at Bruce Wayne Sawyer's school. It was kind of a
Buzz Sawyer's school.
Yeah, well, no, I never heard that. I mean, the thing was that Buzz would purposely stretch these guys. His school in Sacramento. He had other locations, but the most famous one was Sacramento. Lord knows how he landed there. And I am wrapping this up because my voice is going to give out. He would stretch the guys and then not give them their money back. So it was kind of bullshit. And some guys would then take the students like Jerry Monty or Woody Farmer and try to help out when they heard, sad luck story. These guys coughing up 5,000 or 5,500. Buzz stretching them and said, well, I guess you weren't tough enough.
Also, he didn't show up a lot. That Buzz just flat out didn't show up. So, like trainings, people would show up, and he would.
Let's give him the guy's props. In his day, he was an amazing talent. Whether he was a brother, full, legit, half, whatever, was not quite in the same league, but it was an interesting tag team. It was kind of fun. There was no touching Buzz when he was on. I mean, the running power slam and the stuff that he did that was so crisp and great, particularly the feud. No one will forget the feud with Tommy Rich. That was the ultimate for Buzz. That's what got Buzz over. No one had seen him until they saw him on Georgia Championship. They're just going, who the F is this incredible talent? So, maybe he got a little jaded. Maybe he'd been stretched and ripped off. And, that's...
I think he had his own personal demons, with the bottle and with drugs that also kind of led him.
But I forget if it was on a Vern show where Ray Stevens worked, maybe fourth from the bottom a match with Buzz. And I have the photos of it to prove it. So it's the only time Buzz Sawyer ever got to wrestle Ray Stevens. And for me shooting it was kind of a big deal. These matchups you never thought you'd ever see, sort of like Jack Briscoe defending the NWA World Title against Bobo Brazil, total clash of styles, or Jack Briscoe against Ed Carpentier, the Flying Frenchman, who was a several-time world champion. He's the reason the AWA and the Los Angeles WWA world titles were created. They saw his match with Thez. It was supposed to be 2 out of 3, but Carpentier won the first fall. Thez allegedly couldn't continue, was the finish. And 2 promotions, if not Omaha, a total of 3 were born out of that. So Carpentier was main event guy. And it was fun seeing Styles Clash matches. Even Ric Flair title versus title against Bockwinkel. That was a fun match in Winnipeg that I got to shoot. And you never dreamed that you would ever see it, because you remember Ric Flair jobbing to Bockwinkel in like 73 on TV. But then Rick, once he became NWA champion, so we were blessed in the Bay Area, I should say, to see all of this stuff. Maybe not Buzz Sawyer's school, but him wrestle at close to his peak, and a lot of great stuff. I mean, Bill Watts in San Jose ran a UWF TV taping. He had taped like 2 or 3 shows right in San Jose, and Leah Maivia, really the only place she brought her Polynesian pro from Oahu was to San Jose for X amount of shows that were
one show.
No, there were several, and they had guys like.
Look it up. They only did one show. And I was there. I went to it. I was at it. So.
But a lot of people. Well,
who debuted on that one show?
Farmer Boy Ipu?
Well, a little guy named Dwayne Johnson.
I don't remember him. He didn't wrestle. He was.
He did. He was part of like an 8-man tag match where he was like in for like 35 seconds.
Because I'm talking like 89, and he did not wrestle.
No, he wrestled. He wrestled on that first.
I said, "I got to go now."
Okay.
Not your fault. Maybe you can continue on.
No,
if you have the results, bring up the results. I'll bring up the results I had, because the show that we got at San Jose had Kevin Sullivan and Sheik. I can't remember if Brody was on that one or the other one.
There were a lot of matches on that one show, and there was a large tag match that had Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, as his very first. Rocky Johnson was on it too, and
Rocky was on it, but I just don't recall Dwayne. We'll bring up the results.
Yeah, I will.
I was asking you to bring up the results of the AWA shows you went to, but also this Polynesian Pro, because again, it was '89, and The Rock, Dwayne didn't even consider pro wrestling. He was still doing. I don't even know if he was already even doing football. But bring it up. We can talk about it.
Yes.
I gotta go. My voice is about shot.
No, we did pretty good. You pushed it to the wall, and I appreciate your dedication to getting a show out today.
I'll try. And let's all give Jan Weber, the founder or co-founder of Rolling Stone magazine, some shit for those comments about women and African American music artists not being masters. I mean, all you have to do is look at.
Oh yeah, that's a stupid statement.
Judy Collins, Joni Mitchell, Janis Joplin, and
Tina Turner.
Yeah. Tina Turner was the definition of rock and roll.
Yes. So
Marvin Gaye, so many great. Stevie Wonder. Come on, these guys completely changed the game, and particularly Stevie introducing synthesizers into jazz, and
Jimi Hendrix is still regarded as maybe
greatest guitarist of all time. Yeah. So I don't know what the dude was thinking, but he's paying for it.
Well, we'll have more crazy stuff from the WWE, I'm sure, and Vince McMahon.
You know what? Let's talk about that next week. I don't know if we have guests, but I want to talk Polynesian Pro, which was fun, but it was not in the category, the Ed Francis, Russ Francis's dad's wrestling, because this guy, if you have the Sheik against Terry Funk, Double Juice, Texas Death Match all over the Honolulu International Center, now renamed Blaisdell, and you have the opening match, Mil Mascaras against Mad Dog Vachon, and a million pieces of talent. Nick Bockwinkel, Ray Stevens against Pedro Morales, then Tri-WF World Champion, and Bobo Brazil. You're talking major stars. You're not talking some at times intolerable Polynesian pro wrestling. At times good, but not.
Well, I can give my recollections to that one show. We'll talk about it next week, plus probably a lot of other stuff. Who knows who's going to die during the week? We always have some.
I hope no one, because let me say this too. Both guys were super nice. Bruce Moyen, very nice, rolled out the red carpet, had me at his show, and I got to photograph during his training with various people. Luna Vachon came in as an instructor, and Adnan, LKC, Billy White Wolf, super nice guy. I got to pose him with the guy who created the gimmick for him, promoter Ed, one and only Cauliflower Alley. Both of them went to and posed Sheik Adnan, Sheik Billy White Wolf, with Ed Francis, and then some other guys who wrestled. I think Steve Strong got in my shot. He was a big star, teaming with John Tolis in Honolulu towards the end of Ed Francis's promotion. But we'll talk about that next week, Russ.
All right, get better. I hope you recover, and we'll see you all next week, everyone.
Saving my voice till next Sunday.
All right, good night, everyone.
Good night, guys. Thank you, Russ. Thanks, everybody.